Hi, everybody. My name is Noah Levin. I'm the VP of Design at Figma, and I actually had the privilege of hosting the first config in 2020. How many people were at the first config out here? Okay, a couple of you. That's awesome. Every year I look forward to this moment of being with our community, and I have to admit I am especially excited to introduce you to our final config speaker of 2026. When thinking about our config speaker lineup this year, RAC, aka André Anjos, immediately came to mind. Not only is his music incredible, André is constantly pushing and exploring the space between technology and design, and perhaps unsurprisingly, there's a lot in common between music and design, both deeply creative endeavors with the passion for the tools we use, putting in care and detail into our craft, refining even the smallest things that go unnoticed, whether the beats or the pixels. And a big bonus here I discovered is that André uses Figma regularly, and in fact, the slides you're about to see, he designed himself in Figma slides, and I'm just very excited to introduce you to André. And after this talk, Dylan will be back on the stage, so please hang tight. But now, please welcome André.
Hi, everyone. My name is André, and I have a little bit of a confession to make. I almost became a graphic designer. I'm not joking. This was like a real moment before any of this where that was the plan, which means that there's a version of myself where I'm not standing up here. I'm sitting there quietly judging my slides. In my teenage years, I got really into GeoCities and Angel Fire and wanted to design and build websites. And thankfully, literally none of that persists today. I went the other way. I went into music, which in hindsight is a completely insane decision. But the path that I took that I almost took is one that a lot of you are on. And it turns out the thing that I learned on my side of that fork is about to become pretty important to yours. So think of this more as a message from an alternate universe. Now, a quick version of how I got here, because it matters less than where it goes. But I grew up in Portugal. I started playing piano when I was 6. I picked up a guitar around 10. And when I was 12 or 13, I got my first piece of recording software, and this is a true story, in a cereal box. And that was it. Like, my whole life decided in a cereal box. I tried to find an image of it, but I couldn't find it. It's long lost. Oops, there we go. Okay, the software was called Hip Hop EJ, and it was fairly primitive. You drag like little colored loops onto a grid. That was like the whole thing. Everything locked to one tempo, like 120 beats per minute, and there was no click track to it. So when you needed to record a guitar or something, it would count you off like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then silence. And then you have to just start playing and kind of internalize that little tempo that it had. And it also wouldn't play the actual underlying track. So I was basically flying completely blind. And to give maybe an example that makes sense for you guys, imagine having to draw each layer from memory in the dark every time you wanted to make an edit. So a little bit difficult. But I didn't know it then, but that was kind of a gift. The worst software I ever owned taught me the most. Precisely because it couldn't do anything for me. It helped me to understand how to be precise and how to fit things together. And the tools then kept coming. EJ became Mixman, and just Mixman is the one on the top right. Just make a mental note of that aesthetic. It'll come in later. Then eventually that became Cubase. Cubase became Ableton, which is what I use today. This is a very early version, Ableton 6. Each one was more powerful than the last, and each one promising to finally do more work for me. And I really love that process of figuring it out. And this is all pre-YouTube, so there's nobody to teach me. So I taught myself the only way I could back then. I reverse engineered records I loved. I'd hear something and try to rebuild it badly. And I made like a truly heroic amount of terrible music and like years of it. I played in a lot of bands, and slowly by stealing and rebuilding and getting it wrong over and over again, I built an ear. a sense of like what I actually liked, which I think turned out to be one of the only things that I had that was really mine. So eventually, long story short, I moved to the US. I started a project called RAC. I'll be honest about what RAC was originally. It was actually a business. It was a remix for hire business, because I figured out while I was in college that nobody's going to hire me to wrap cables in a studio. And if I wanted a career in music, I had to sort of build my own door. And the thing about remixes, though, the expected move at the time was to take a song and make like a dance club version of it. That's what remixing was. And I just couldn't do it. It wasn't a part of me. It wasn't because I was like above it, or it just wasn't mine. And I just didn't come from that world. And the first time I ever set foot in a nightclub was actually the night I was performing in one, to give you some context. So I did the one thing that felt honest. Instead of club versions, I made reinventions, let's call them that. I take a song and turn it to like an indie rock version of itself. I change a chord so it carried a different emotion. I'd find a new angle or on something that was already most of the time pretty good. And I did that purely because it felt true to me. And that one decision, which I want to be clear, was not like a real strategy. It was almost an accident. It was just me being unable to fake it. And it was the thing that ultimately set me apart. So my first remix that I did was for a little unknown band called The Shins on Sub Pop in 2007. And how that happened tells you a little bit of how this actually works. So I was just a kid in college, and I liked The Shins, and I saw an announcement that they had a new album coming out. It's Wincing the Night Away. And there's basically like two kinds of remixes. There's the bootleg kind that you do in your bedroom, and you put it up online for free. And then there's the official kind, which is where you get the artist involved, and you get paid for that. Not very much, but you get paid a little bit. And they also give you the master files and all that. So that's very helpful if you want to do any kind of like real engineering. But I had to basically get the artist to agree to it first. And I'm starting from nothing, so how do I do this? So I went on their website. This is back when a band would literally have their manager's phone number sitting right there on the site. I don't think they do that anymore. So I just called them, and I said, I wish I remember the conversation, but I think I was so nervous. And I was like, hi, I make remixes or whatever I said, and I'd love to do one for the band. And he says, oh, okay, well, we'll ask them and we'll get back to you. And I think what I didn't understand at the time is that nobody asked indie bands for remixes. It just wasn't a thing. Remixes were like a dance world thing and like a club thing. And I think they said yes, mostly because they were a little thrown that some kid had even called them. So I'm going to play a little bit of a snippet of the original and a little bit of my version after. Go without till the need seeps in your love. This is my version. Go without till the need seeps in your love anymore. Collect your novel petals for us down and glow. Just for context, so when I, thank you. Thank you. I lived with 3 roommates at the time, and I had to somehow find time where where one person or nobody was there, so I could record like my little acoustic guitar with like just like most basic microphone. So it's kind of actually preparing for this, I hadn't heard a lot of this stuff in a long time, so it's kind of a fun little trip down memory lane for me. So that was my first remix, and like nobody opened the door for me. I found the number and I called it. You do one, you do another, and then another, and people start to notice. And in those early days, I think I probably did hundreds of remixes. I was pretty busy. And here's where I learned the actual lesson. and I learned it the hard way more than once. Almost every time I made something like for an audience, every time I sat down and thought, oh, okay, this is what people will like, this will do numbers, it missed. Sometimes it did fine on paper, but it never became the thing that people actually loved, the thing that lasted. And every time I made something purely because I liked it, that's the thing that connected. And that sounds kind of backwards. You'd think that aiming at the audience would hit the audience, but it doesn't. Because the second you aim at what people want, you're aiming at, let's say, an average, the safe, expected, middle thing, and nobody has ever loved an average thing. The work that reaches people is specific, and the only way to make something specific is to make things that you actually want to exist. So making it for myself was never like a retreat from the audience, it was the only road to them. So fast forward, I spent 3 years on my first album like of original work, so I was kind of moving on from remixes a little bit. I called it Strangers, because I basically didn't meet any of the collaborators during the process. I got to work with some incredible artists, and it was all done over the internet. I spent thousands and thousands of hours. You only get one first album, so this was really important to me. I wanted it to be seamless. I wanted it to take you somewhere, and more than anything, it made me feel something. So let's hear a little bit of it. By the way, the artwork is done by an incredible artist named Andrew Myers. This has sort of been a theme with a lot of my albums. I get to, even though I'm not a designer, I get to work through other designers and get to be sort of a curator, if you will. So I got signed to a major label. Suddenly I'm touring the world, the whole thing. It's like out of a movie, and the height of everything I ever wanted. This photo's from us playing Lollapalooza that year. And by the time I got to making my first original record, something had shifted. The music I was writing wasn't really electronic music anymore. It was more like band music, and none of it really worked in that DJ setting at all. So I made a choice. I took the project that was working as an electronic act and tore it down, and I rebuilt it as a live band. I got my college friends working together, and we put a real show on, and we also played Coachella that year. And the Coachella part isn't the point. I think the point is the choice. And I gave up a lane that was already working, and because it wasn't true. And the truer version is what pulled the whole project out of the electronic world into something much broader. And that's one of the things I'm the proudest of, and it cost me something to do it. And it was the first time in my life I really had to sit with criticism. People with opinions about my work in public. I kind of got by without that for a while, and suddenly had a little bit of attention, and something strange happened, almost like, let's call it an immune response. The more I got judged from the outside, the more I turned inward and asked one question, it's like, what do I actually like? Does this speak to me? And it was that outside pressure is what built the instrument I'd use to ignore the outside pressure, if that makes sense. The crowd's judgment is literally what taught me to stop needing the crowd's judgment. Which brings me to the real moment. This is what this whole talk is about. After all of it, the touring, the come down, the years of grinding, I had to make a second record. It's like, oh no, the sophomore slump. So maybe I just worry about that stuff, but and I was standing at a fork. I could double down or do the thing that had already worked, give people more of what they liked, or I could make something true to where I actually was in my life right then. It was different, riskier, and no guarantee. And here's the part about that nobody tells you about that fork. Like the pull towards the easy route, it doesn't come from your enemies. It comes from everybody who loves you. It's your label who wants you to win. And it's the team who has your back. It's the fans who adored the last record and just want more. Even your own brain, who remembers exactly what worked. All of them with total kindness are pulling you towards repeating yourself. And I didn't. I made a record that was one single continuous piece of music. It's exactly 1 hour long, like down to the second. It was no real breaks. There was interludes, connective tissue, everything flowing into everything else. It was obsessively detailed. It was very deliberately not a pop album. It was the opposite of the safe move, and it could have completely flopped. I think I'm prouder of that decision than almost anything I've done, because at the end of the day, I'm the one who has to live with this. This stuff is a representation of who I am, and as much as fans love my work, seriously nobody cares about this more than I do. Let's listen to a little bit of it.
We used to say this song made us feel some type of way. It used to make us both feel free. Underneath the covers, you would grab my hand. You'd say you never listened to without me.
Now, here's why I'm telling, thank you. Now, here's why I'm telling a music story to a room full of designers. Everything I just described, the audience, the criticism, the people in my corner pulling me towards the average, there's now a new source of that same exact pull. It's infinitely stronger, infinitely patient, and it never sleeps, and I'm sure you've been hearing about it all week. Because what is a generative model, really? It's a consensus engine. The average of everything that's ever been made handed back to you instantly for free. It's the view from everywhere, which is the same as the view from nowhere, because it belongs to no one. And I think that might be why it feels a little bit empty. And here's the thing I want you to take home, because I think it's the whole thing. It used to be hard to be average. For most of history, being competent, reliably good, professional, solid was hard won. It was a whole career, a respectable, well-paid place to stand. And the machine just made it free, instant, infinite, competent, and generic. So the comfortable middle, where most working professionals actually live, is the exact ground being washed out from under us. So competence isn't the moat anymore. It's the thing that you can get for nothing. And the only thing left with any value is the part of you that the machine cannot average. It's your point of view. It's the thing that specifically, particularly, irreducibly is yours. Let's call it your voice. Everybody tells you to find your voice like it's a piece of advice that you'll get to eventually. What they don't tell you is that the entire system has gravity, and it's pulling you every single day towards not having one. Towards the middle, it's not a one-time climb where you arrive and plant the flag. It's gravity. The pull never stops. The moment you relax, you slide towards the mean. And it gets more personal the further along you are. Earlier on, the gravity pulls you towards generic, towards everyone else. But once you found something that works, it starts pulling you towards yourself, towards becoming a tribute act to your own greatest hits. The easiest thing in the world at any level is to make the safe version of wherever you already are. And I should be really honest with you, it's gotten me plenty of times. I'm not immune to this whatsoever. There are remixes and projects all throughout my career where I felt that pull, and I just gave in. I made the safe, obvious version. And the uncomfortable part about that is that sometimes it even worked. It did its job, paid in the moment. It never felt like much, but those are the ones that I actually regret. Not because they failed or they did well, because I know that I didn't try as hard as I could have. And that's how gravity gets you. It doesn't beat you by making you fail, it beats you by rewarding you just enough to keep you from reaching. And, oh, there we go. One more thing about point of view, and it's important. It has to be able to be wrong. A real point of view can fail, it can flop. That exposure, the fact that you could be wrong is a signature of a human having made something. The machine's output is never wrong because it never commits to anything. It risks nothing. That's, I think, exactly why it feels bland. If you can't fail at it, it isn't a point of view. It's just consensus wearing your name. Now, maybe you're wondering, okay, did that risky second record, did that actually work out? And the honest answer is it set up the one after it, a record called Boy, which has since sort of become the most successful thing I've made, and I released it March of 2020, arguably the worst moment in history to put out an album, and it still found its people somehow. So let's listen to it a little bit.
Screen, waiting for an SMS saying your name. I don't want anyone if it ain't you. I don't want anyone if it ain't you. Change the stories we were told.
Thank you. I have to be a little bit careful how I tell you that, because it's easy to hear, oh, I trusted myself and I got rewarded, but that's not the lesson. The success was not the reward for the risk. The risk was the reward. And the success was just what happened when I finally stopped trying to manufacture it. The truest thing I'd made was the thing that traveled even in the worst possible conditions, because specificity survives bad weather and the generic needs a tailwind. And trusting your voice isn't just one brave moment. It's an ongoing practice. The second record was the risk, and Boy was me taking it again. So here's what I actually came up here to say. We're about to spend the rest of our careers alongside a machine that can produce the average of everything instantly for free. It will be very good. It will be very convenient. It will be pulling you gently, kindly, constantly towards the middle. And use it by all means. Just don't let it think for you. Let it help you think. And the moment you hand it the wheel, it drives you to the middle. So this is just a little bit of an aside, but to give you an example of how I'm using this today, here's what this looks like for me. After doing this for 20 plus years, I've gotten very opinionated about my tools. I reference Mixman. You can kind of see some themes emerging 20 years later. But I basically started using these tools to sort of finally build something I wanted to for a long time. My own software, my own plugins. And this is a tool that helps build my own tools. So the machine didn't decide what to make. I have 20 years of opinions that decided for me. I use the one thing that produces the average to manufacture the one thing it can't average, which is my own taste. I turned it into something I can actually use. The tool is the point of view. And I build this for myself. But it turns out that it's useful for other people, which is kind of the whole thing all over again. The specific thing travels. And the kid who got handed, software in a cereal box is now building his own. And that's the machine helping me think. It's not the machine thinking for me. So let me give you a quick little demo of what these are. These are audio plugins. You put them on. Probably a lot of you are familiar with this, but you get the idea. So this is a spring reverb tank, kind of emulating hardware. This is an echo, which is a common effect, but I wanted to give it my own spin. Of course, distortion, you have to. And this one is it's emulating pre-digital, like older digital sampling, the tape deck, and yeah, I could go on here. There's a whole bunch of them. But so, you know, the one. Oh, thank you. The one thing it can't do is be you, and it can only know it can know everything about you and still not be you. So the only move that still works is the one I stumbled onto as a kid. It's the make the thing that you would love, even if it flops. It's just like a feel-good sentiment, you know. I think it's the last strategy left standing. And you know, I started by telling you that I almost became a graphic designer. I don't know how serious I was, but you know, at the time I'd like to think so. The kid in Portugal who taught himself about music out of a cereal box is the same person who 20 years later made a record called Boy. And it took me my whole career to understand that the most valuable thing I ever had was the one thing I started with, and it was the thing that was only mine. As for now, it's been 6 years since my last album. I'm back to the beginning of figuring out what the hell I'm going to do and how I'm going to reinvent it all. I don't know. I think that's ultimately what this is all about. It's about the journey. It's about the exploration. It's about the process, and that's the one thing that they cannot average. So my parting message to you is to be yourself. Thank you very much.